LoveLore Library. Chapter 553. Li Yingying's crying stopped abruptly. She just looked at the young and handsome emperor as if he was a stranger at this moment. This lowly servant is a slave of your Feng Qi palace. Imperial concubine didn't discipline her properly, so she caused trouble. Now, imperial concubine still wants to plead for her. The man's emotionless words made Xin Yueji have no doubt that he meant that if she dared to plead for her, he would definitely deal with her as well. The development of the matter was beyond Xin Yueji's expectation. Even if she had taken all precautions to come here, she had neglected that the red-eyed Feng Jiuqing and the black-eyed emperor were two different people. In front of the red-eyed Feng Jiuqing, no matter what she said or did, he would not listen. "Your Majesty." Xin Yueji knelt on the ground and looked neither servile nor overbearing. "Your Majesty, please investigate this matter clearly. It's because I know that Li Yingying is a slave of my Feng Qi palace. I have known Li Yingying for some time, and I know her a little bit. I am willing to believe everything she said is true. Recently, the rumors about the late empress have been spreading in the harem for some time." She raised her eyes and saw Feng Jiuqing's gloomy face, which was like an iceberg that was about to burst. She gritted her teeth and braced herself. "I know that your Majesty loves the late empress, and you hate Li Yingying for not knowing what to do and hurting the late empress's body, but," she raised her head. "Your Majesty also punished Li Yingying, didn't you? The injury on her arm is enough to relieve your Majesty's hatred. At this moment, your Majesty should calm down and analyze who is behind all this. Before this, there was a slave who claimed to be from Xianghe Palace who was ordered by the Empress to say that your Majesty had a headache in the imperial study and asked me to come and accompany your Majesty to relieve the headache. I was not feeling well, so I stayed in Feng Qi Palace for some time and asked Li Yingying to come and visit me first. Although I don't know what happened after she came to the imperial study, I can guarantee that there must be someone behind all this. Moreover, that person must have come for this concubine. This concubine was unwell and couldn't come earlier, so Li Yingying rushed ahead of this concubine and caught up with this matter." At the side, Li Yingying complained in a low voice, "What imperial consort Nyang said is absolutely true. This servant. It was this servant who made the decision to come to the imperial study to visit His Majesty behind imperial consort Nyang's back. Everything is this servant's fault. If she had known that this would happen when she came to the imperial study, she would never have thought of doing that." Only now did she understand what Xin Yueji had said to her before entering the palace. In this harem, there were dangerous places everywhere. If she was not careful, in the past, she didn't think much of it. She thought that as long as she was kind to others, she would be worry-free in the harem. Even if she didn't have a huge family, what could she do? But now, such thoughts had long since been erased from the bottom of her heart. According to Imperial Consort Nyang, this matter is related to the Empress. This concubine is also afraid that there is a trap. Although that slave who claimed to be from Xianghe Palace claimed to be a slave of Xianghe Palace, this concubine has never seen her before. I only felt that this person was unfamiliar, so before she left, I ordered someone to secretly detain her. As for today's matter in the imperial study, His Majesty only needs to ask that slave to know. Imperial Consort Xin is really scheming. This sentence was neither light nor heavy. It seemed to be a compliment, but also a criticism. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Prince Regent, Messing with Claw Bookhouse, for free. Chapter 554. She looked at the emperor who still had red eyes. She was surprised. His red eyes only appeared for a moment, and he could suppress them and restore them to black. But now, after such a long time, it seemed that he didn't want to retreat at all. She could deal with the gentle and affectionate Feng Jiuqing for the time being, but Xin Yueji didn't know anything about the red-eyed Feng Jiuqing. Qiu Yang. Your Majesty. Call the Empress here. I want to ask her personally. Yes. Qiu Yang hesitated, looked at Shin Yueji who was kneeling there, and left. From the beginning to the end, Shin Yueji knelt there, and the young emperor didn't move, as if she didn't exist. She hadn't knelt for so long since she was reborn, and she wasn't unscathed from the broken heart cliff. Her legs were a little numb, but when she raised her head to look at the handsome emperor, he held her body in his arms as if it was a precious treasure. He was so careful and cautious, as if he was afraid that he would hurt her if he made any heavy movements. Your Majesty, there's something I don't understand. She suddenly spoke, which made Feng Zhiqing's hand on Gu Yueqin's face stop. Then he looked at her with his dark eyes and responded silently. Shin Yueji moved her lips. I heard that the late empress was already drowned in the lake, and her face was covered with nails, and even the child in her belly was. In an instant, cold air spread everywhere. If it wasn't for someone secretly protecting her, Shin Yueji couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't be like Li Yingying, flying out powerlessly. She knelt in the same place, which surprised Feng Zhiqing a little. His words were still full of sarcasm. You're indeed a woman from a family of generals. What a strong will. But what qualifications do you have to ask about my affairs? Your Majesty hid the late Empress's body in the imperial study, and today so many people saw it. So what? Even if your Shin family has a high position in the court, do you need me to remind you what you should say and what you shouldn't say? I won't say it, but it doesn't mean that there are no impenetrable walls in this world. Feeling his sharp killing intent fall on Li Yingying's body, Li Yingying was the first to react. Her lips trembled as she tried to argue for herself. Emperor, don't worry, this servant will not speak carelessly. This servant will forever keep what I saw in my heart and will never mention it. Imperial Guard Qiu is His Majesty's trusted secret guard, so he must have known about this long ago. Naturally, I won't betray your Majesty, but has your Majesty ever thought that the Empress might know of this? Her words made the Emperor's eyes narrow. Just now, this concubine also told your Majesty that it was a servant from the Empress Xianghe Palace who said that your Majesty's body was unwell. In the end, Yingying came earlier than this concubine and such a thing happened. This matter was originally targeted at this concubine, but Yingying was used as a shield. So, this concubine guessed that the Empress already knew about this matter. You want to kill two birds with one stone. You want to take the opportunity to get rid of the late Empress's body and make your Majesty hate me because of the late Empress. Thinking about it carefully, what Shin Yueji said was not unreasonable. Feng Zhiqing already hated that self-righteous woman. Now hearing Shin Yueji's words. If it's really her, I won't let her off easily. Chapter 555. Your Majesty has promised me that the Gu family has a high status in the court and cannot be touched easily. Even if this matter is related to the Empress, I'm afraid that your Majesty will not be able to punish her. It's just the Gu family. I am the ruler of Feng country. Do you think I will be afraid of a mere official? The man sneered and held the woman's body in his arms. If it is really as Imperial Concubine Shin said, and this matter is related to the Empress, I will not let it go. As for you, the servant of Feng Qi Palace. He looked at Li Yingying coldly. Li Yingying felt numb under his cold gaze. An intense chill swept through her body, and she knelt there, shivering. No matter what the reason is, Qin, who hurt me is true. Imperial Concubine Shin, how do you think I should be satisfied with her? Since Li Yingying hit the Empress with her hands, then cut off her hands as an apology to the Empress. Imperial Concubine. Li Yingying couldn't believe what she heard. Who knew better than her what cutting off her hands meant to her? She would be a cripple. How could a healthy person like her become a cripple? If she lost both her arms, then how? How could she? How could she? Be favored again. At this moment, she was filled with hatred towards Shin Yueji. That hatred rose up spontaneously, especially when she saw that Shin Yueji didn't even look at her and decided to punish her. What did a pair of hands mean to her? If she lost her hands, she would be a cripple. Who would allow herself to be a cripple? Imperial concubine Shin, do you really want to cut off my hands? It's not that I want to cut off your hands, but I want to give the Empress an explanation. Remember, His Majesty wants your life, but this consort only wants to save your life. Compared to keeping you alive, these hands of yours are indeed nothing. But this servant still needs to serve Imperial concubine Shin. If this servant's hands are cut off, this servant won't be able to serve Imperial concubine Shin. My Phoenix Perch Palace doesn't lack servants. Imperial concubine Shin. Shin Yueji's tone was cold. One of her arms had been destroyed and was dripping with blood. Even if it was cured, it would be useless. Why are you doing this to me? She clearly knew that the Empress had a trick. Why didn't she tell her in advance? That way, she wouldn't have come and wouldn't have ended up in this situation. She was good at scheming. No matter what Gu Yueqin did, it was all within her calculations. Why didn't she tell her even though she knew? Li Yingying's eyes were also brimming with tears. Shuangshi stood respectfully at the side, unable to ignore the intense hatred that shot out from the depths of her eyes. Indeed, compared to her life, these hands were much lighter. Moreover, the Emperor seemed to be very satisfied with her ladyship's explanation. He only lacked the punishment. Seeing the hidden guards coming forward to carry out the punishment, Your Majesty, Shin Yueji suddenly said. The Emperor looked at her impatiently. Does the imperial consort still want to plead for leniency? Everything is still unknown. The Empress hasn't arrived yet, so this matter needs to be discussed at length. Why don't we wait for the truth? I've said it before, it's a fact that this bitch hurt Qin. Li Yingying looks 90% similar to the late Empress. Doesn't Your Majesty feel that hurting her is like hurting the late Empress? That one sentence made the man stunned. Baiduan read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, the Regent, Messing with the Claw Book House, for free. Chapter 556. He lowered his head and looked at the young girl in his arms. Wu Su raised his head and looked at Li Yingying, who was kneeling not far away. Indeed, the two of them looked very similar. If one had not known them for a long time, it would have been difficult to tell them apart. However, the man quickly retracted his gaze from Li Yingying and said, speaking of this matter, I have yet to pursue Imperial Consort Shin's wrongdoings. Why did you find a woman who looks similar to Qin, to confuse me? It's all because Your Majesty is obsessed with the late Empress and has no interest in politics. I couldn't bear to see Your Majesty grieving over this, so I came up with this idea. Your Majesty, you have tacitly agreed to all of this. Have you forgotten about it so quickly? The man's dark eyes were sharp. Sensing her probing, he carefully placed the woman in his arms on the table and walked towards her. Shin Yueji was a little flustered when she saw the man walking towards her. It was the same in the past. She had no intention of disobeying him, but he had tried to kill her several times. Furthermore, the strong murderous intent in his eyes did not seem to be fake. He had tried to kill her several times. She was starting to suspect that there were two people living in Feng Zhuqing's body. Even her reincarnation had occurred because of such an unimaginable conjecture, let alone him. What are you testing me about? This concubine doesn't dare. This concubine is only speaking the truth. After all, these things were promised to this concubine by Your Majesty, and it was also tacitly acknowledged by this concubine. This concubine just doesn't understand why Your Majesty seems to have forgotten everything today. Perhaps it was because there were other people around, the man did not make a move on her this time. Instead, his thin lips curled into a cruel smile. By the time Shin Yueji reacted, all she could hear was Li Yingying's heart-wrenching screams. The air was filled with the strong smell of blood. The smell of blood was nauseating. Then, she saw that Li Yingying, who had been perfectly fine a moment ago, had lost her arms. She was lying helplessly on the ground, rolling around in pain. Her beautiful face was contorted by this heart-wrenching pain. There was already a sea of blood beneath her. It was a ghastly sight. Shin Yueji did not expect Feng Juqing to make a move just like that. She was caught off guard, and when she saw Li Yingying in such a terrible state, she only gave Shuangxi a look. Seeing this, Shuangxi immediately went forward and patted Li Yingying's shoulder. The girl looked extremely helpless as she fainted. Even the white clothes on his body were dyed red with blood, making him look like a red wedding dress. She did not see when Feng Juqing made his move, but other than the black-clothed man who had not moved at all, they were the only ones left. Shin Yueji pretended to be calm. Your Majesty can be so heartless to the woman you sleep with. Is it that when you treat her well, if this concubine makes a mistake, you will also treat this concubine like this? The cruel smile on the man's lips could not be hidden. What does Imperial Consort think? If I had come here today to treat the former Empress as this servant's concubine, Your Majesty would not have punished this servant's concubine like this, right? Imperial Consort Shin, since you are the mistress of the inner palace, you should understand what you should do and what you shouldn't do. You should not challenge Shin's bottom line. None of you are qualified to touch her. Including him. The him that His Majesty is talking about, I wonder who he is referring to. The Empress has arrived. Chapter 557. The report made Shin Yueji swallow the words that were at the tip of her tongue. She just realized that Gao Dezhong wasn't with Feng Juqing, but with Gu Yueyin. Greetings to Your Majesty. I didn't know that Your Majesty would summon me at this time. Before she could finish her words, she raised her head and was shocked to see Gu Yueqin in his arms. Gu Yueyin covered her mouth in fear, so that she didn't scream, "Sister! Sister! Didn't my sister already? At this time, Gu Yueyin suddenly thought of something and turned her head quickly. When she saw Li Yingying lying in a pool of blood, her face changed dramatically. Not Li Yingying. Not someone who looked like her sister. Looking at the indifferent face of the young emperor, Gu Yueyin felt uneasy. Your Majesty, why is my sister's body here? She isn't she already dead? The young emperor's tone was as cold as ice. Gu Yueyin raised her head suddenly and saw the emperor's scarlet eyes that could drip blood. There was a flash of fear in her eyes, which was almost the same as Shin Yueji's. Her reaction made Shin Yueji suspicious. Could it be that she also knew that Feng Juqing had two personalities? And looking at her reaction, it seemed that she was very afraid of the current Feng Juqing. Gu Yueyin's face was pale, but she pretended to be calm. I'm stupid, I don't understand what Your Majesty is talking about. Today, I was plotted against and poisoned. Originally, I planned to rest early today, but I didn't expect that Qiu Yang would go to my place and say that the Emperor wants to see me. So, I came here. I don't know what happened, and... She raised her head and looked at Gu Yueqin's body, which was still intact. Why is my sister's body in the imperial study? Ah, a scream. Her whole body was in the young emperor's palm. The man's strong strength and bloodthirsty scarlet eyes made Gu Yueyin struggle and resist. Her feet were off the ground, and only her hands were clapping non-stop with the emperor's strong hands. Cough cough. Cough cough, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, this concubine is her. Your Majesty. Your Majesty, you can't. Qiu Yang didn't dare to hesitate when he saw Gu Yueyin being unceremoniously captured by the man. He quickly pulled out his long sword and stabbed it towards the man. As Feng Zhiqing's trusted aide, Qiu Yang's loyalty wasn't inferior to anyone else. But now, he actually dared to openly attack Feng Zhiqing. The man didn't put him in his eyes at all. Even if Qiu Yang attacked him, he just waved his hand coldly and Qiu Yang flew out uncontrollably. Your Majesty, you mustn't. The person in your hands is the Empress, the youngest daughter of the Gu family. Qiu Yang spat out a mouthful of blood with great difficulty. His words sounded even weaker. Feng Zhiqing sneered, and the corners of his lips curled up disdainfully. The one I want to kill is her. Cough, 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 Gu Yueyin struggled with all her might in his hands. But how could a woman be a match for a man? Not to mention that Feng Zhiqing had clearly known who she was from the start and wanted to kill her. Swoosh! Just when Gu Yueyin was completely immersed in the suffocating pain, a cold light flashed in front of her eyes, and there was the sound of a long sword being unsheathed. Yuyin took the suffocating girl into his arms and retreated 3 feet away. Chapter 558. Gu Yueyin gasped for air. She didn't even care about her image at this moment. She hid in Yu Yin's embrace, not daring to come out. She looked at the man who wanted to put her to death in fear. Your Highness, what's wrong with His Majesty? Has he gone mad? Beside her, Shuangxi carefully walked to Shen Yueji's side and helped her up from the ground. Shen Yueji didn't have the heart to answer her. Instead, she looked at the man who was holding Gu Yueyin in his arms with a pained expression. The young man who was once covered in blood had grown up into an elegant young man. Thinking back to the time when he appeared at the entrance of the Prime Minister's residence covered in blood, she secretly carried him on her back and took care of him for 3 days and 3 nights. A person who was about to die was forcefully pulled back by her with all her might. Later on, this matter was discovered by Gu Yueyin. Seeing this young master's delicate appearance, she kept him by her side. From then on, Shen Yueji only knew that Gu Yueyin had gained a trusted secret guard. This secret guard obeyed her orders. No matter what she wanted, he would think of a way. Even if it was a mountain of knives or a sea of flames, he would snatch it back for her. What are you still standing there for? Hurry and summon the imperial physician. Gu Yueyin screamed at the top of her lungs. She pushed Yuyin away and slapped him on the face. The handsome young man's handsome face had a conspicuous palm print, but he stood there without moving. If I leave, he will hurt you. Don't worry about it. I'm his empress. I'm the woman he loves the most. He's just been bewitched by that slut. He will get better. Yuyin was pushed away by her, but he didn't say a word. He didn't even move a single step. At this time, countless secret guards appeared from the shadows. It was chaotic and it was hard to tell who was whose. At this time, Shen Yueji saw a figure flash past in front of her, then behind her. The body of the emperor, who had scarlet eyes and a domineering aura, slowly fell down. Kong Yin supported him, shook his head and sighed, saying Amitabha. When this farce began and when it ended, it was like a dream. Feng Zhiqing woke up very quickly. Gu Yueyin was the first to rush over and hug the man's arm, sobbing uncontrollably, Your Majesty, do you know that your headache is acting up again? You almost killed this concubine just now. Gu Yueyin showed him the red mark on her neck. The man faintly glanced at her, there was no expression on his handsome face, but he still gently comforted her a few times and said some words of apology. Soon, Shen Yueji felt the emperor's gaze on her. Just now, Yuing had already disappeared somewhere. She saw Feng Zhiqing coming down from his high seat and walking towards her step by step. Shen Yueji stood there without moving. The man gently took her into his arms. Yuji, I lost control again, did I hurt you? No. Shin Yueji shook her head and looked at the lifeless Li Yingying. Your Majesty, although you didn't hurt this concubine, you hurt Miss Yingying. Your Majesty, speaking of which, Miss Yingying was innocent because she was worried about you, and now her legs have been chopped off. Gao Dezhong. Your Majesty, your servant is here. Pass down my decree. From today onwards, Li Yingying will be reinstated as a second-rank concubine. Yes, Your Majesty. Then, at this point, Gao Dezhong paused and signaled the emperor to look back. Chapter 559. The body of the late empress was still there. The fact that Gu Yueqin's body had been buried was no longer a secret, everyone present knew about it. Feng Zhiqing glanced at the woman's corpse, and his brows knit together while a wisp of disgust flashed through his eyes. In next to no time, he moved his gaze away and pulled Shin Yueji into his embrace. Qiu Yang. Your subordinate is here. Put her back where she was. Yes. Just as Feng Zhiqing had said, that man was getting more and more uncontrollable. If he were to deal with Gu Yueqin now, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't jump out again. At that time, even if Kong Yin was here, it would be useless. Your Majesty. She had suffered such a big shock. She thought that the emperor would comfort her at least a little. She didn't expect that he would just say a sentence that was as emotionless as a machine, and then he went to Shin Yueji's side. Gu Yueyin clenched her fists. Your Majesty, this concubine doesn't feel well. Gao Dezhong. Your servant is here. Send the empress back to her palace. Summon the Tai to take a look at her body. Yes. Emperor. Gu Yueyin looked up at him in disbelief. How did Yu Ji appear here? How did Gu Yueyin's body become public? Empress, do you still want us to continue? Gu Yueyin understood what Feng Zhiqing was trying to say. If she continued to pester him, he would make her pay for what she had done to Gu Yueqin, including how she had schemed against Shin Yueji. However, she was unwilling to leave just like that. She wanted Shin Yueji to stay and give them a chance to be alone. Your Majesty, this concubine is also tired. Since Your Majesty is fine, this concubine will return to Phoenix Palace to rest first. Yu Ji, wait a moment. We have something to say to you. Seeing that she was about to leave, the man grabbed her hand and didn't let her go. Qiu Yang, wait outside and don't let anyone in. Kong Yin, you stay here. Yes. Yes, Your Majesty. Both Double Happiness and Gu Yueyin were chased out. Soon, only the three of them were left in the large imperial study. Feng Zhiqing did not say anything, and neither did Shin Yueji. She just lowered her head, deep in thought. The man lifted Wu Su's chin. She was forced to look at the man's gentle and handsome face. Don't you want to ask me? When we were in the general's estate, His Majesty had also done this. This concubine knows that His Majesty was unwilling to talk about this matter with others. This Chia knows that Your Majesty likes clever and obedient women, so even if this Chia has doubts in my heart, I still don't dare to overstep my boundaries. Yu Ji, we hope that you can ask us. This Chia doesn't know how to ask Your Majesty. Just like what the Empress said just now, this Chia feels that Your Majesty cares about this Chia, but sometimes, this Chia feels that Your Majesty treats this Chia as a dispensable person. At this point, Shin Yueji looked at Kong Yin and said, I had originally planned to ask Grandmaster Kong Yin. Amitba. As matters stand, this is all this I can do. Perhaps Imperial Consort doesn't know, but there are two souls living in the Emperor's body. Two souls. How unimaginable was this? Even though he already had an answer in his heart, hearing it from Kong Yin's mouth now, seeing the look on the woman's face. The man held her pale face and chuckled. Are you afraid? Why 2 souls? I've had 2 souls since I was young. Since. Chapter 560. When my mother was still alive, she told me that she was a twin, but it was difficult to give birth, so she could only save one, Your Majesty's mother. In order to save you, there are many unimaginable things in this world. Newborn babies are filled with hatred. Even after they die, their souls are unwilling to leave, so they are placed in Your Majesty's body and were born together with Your Majesty. In the beginning, I was still able to suppress him. After all, it was his own body, but he looked at the woman lying on the dragon table. But ever since she appeared, I found out that he would secretly come out from my body to be with her. Hearing Feng Jiuqing's words, Shen Yueji pursed her lips and took a step back subconsciously. Yueji. Seeing this, Feng Jiuqing hurriedly grabbed her hand. I know you can't accept it right now. She couldn't accept that he was one person, but there were 2 souls living in his body. One of them loved Gu Yueqin, and the other loved her. Shen Yueji felt complicated. Actually, Your Majesty loved the late Empress, but the one who loved the late Empress was not you, but someone else. Yes. Feng Jiuqing nodded without hesitation. Then, the one who executed the late Empress was you, Your Majesty. And not him. Executing Gu Yueqin was originally to appease the Gu family, allowing Gu Yueyin to smoothly ascend to the position of Empress. But for some reason, when he met Shen Yueji's gaze, he couldn't bring himself to say the word, yes, no matter what. He didn't know why he wanted to tell Shen Yueji all this. Since she had already seen what happened tonight, and since he had already thought about looking down on the Feng nation with her, he decided to try to believe her and accept everything she told him. But he was afraid that if he said it, Shen Yueji would treat him as a weirdo. Yueji, I know it's hard for you to accept it. I'm also trying to think of a way. Because I executed the woman he loved, he knows that I care about you, so he always wants to hurt you. Those vows of undying love, those words he said he liked her, and on the heartbroken cliff, he tried his best to protect her scarlet eyes. She thought that it was because Feng Jiuqing cared too much about her and was too afraid of losing her that his eyes turned red. Now that she thought about it, it turned out that everything was just a dream. Even if there were 2 souls in the same body, the man had never let her down. The person who wanted to kill her was this man. But now, he was thinking of ways to get rid of that man. It was as if fate was making a fool out of them. Your Majesty, have you thought of a way? Very soon, Yuji, give us time, we will definitely not let him harm you. Feng Jiuqing did not tell her the exact time. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her shoulders and said, trust me. Where's the late Empress? She pushed the man away slightly and looked at the girl lying on the dragon table. It was a familiar face and a familiar figure. Looking at it now, it felt as if it was a lifetime ago. I heard that the child in the late Empress' belly was taken out by Your Majesty personally. Her face was full of nails and she was sunk in the South Lake. With so many people seeing it, how could she appear here unscathed? How could her face be unscathed? Even her belly, it was so flat, as if nothing had happened and she had not gone through those hardships. Chapter 561. Gu Yueqin is not pregnant. It's just an illusion. She has never slept with me, including him. Never. She looked into the man's serious eyes. Illusion. All of this is an illusion Your Majesty gave her. Then, when she was executed by Your Majesty, was it also an illusion? She couldn't say it was an illusion. He really wanted to execute Gu Yueqin. It was that man who suddenly appeared and secretly manipulated everything. But Gu Yueqin was indeed dead. He watched her die with his own eyes. Then, for a moment, it was hard to digest what Feng Zhiqing said to her. Shen Yueji looked at Kong Yin and saw him nodding at her. She knew that Feng Zhiqing didn't lie to her. It was no wonder that she would faint at every critical moment. In fact, even the child was an illusion. They had never slept together, so how could they have a child? Until now, she was still a virgin. As if she thought of something, she quickly pushed the man away, ran to the dragon table, and lifted the woman's arm. At this moment, the chastity mark fell into her eyes like mockery. Previously, she thought that she had slept with a man, and even the chastity mark on her arm disappeared. But now, the chastity mark appeared in front of her. It was so glaring. This meant, in her previous life, she and Feng Zhiqing really didn't have a child. She was innocent until the day she died. With complicated feelings in her heart, Shen Yueji slowly put down her hand and took a few steps back. She saw Feng Zhiqing walking towards her quickly. Yueji, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Your Majesty, I'm tired. I want to go back and rest. The man made a gesture to carry her up. I'll go to your place tonight. Your Majesty, she struggled in his arms, looked up, and met the man's displeased eyes. There are so many things happening in the Imperial study tonight. Your Majesty still has a lot of things to deal with, so you don't have to go to my place. I need to digest. Feng Zhiqing didn't force her. He nodded. All right, I'll order someone to send you back. There's no need. Shuangxi is outside. I'll be fine with Shuangxi accompanying me. Having said that, she did not look at the Emperor's reaction and turned to leave. The man watched her leave in a daze. It wasn't until Kong Yin called him from behind that he came back to his senses and looked at her. Your Majesty, should we return the Empress' body to its original place? If he could, he wanted to burn the corpse. Feng Zhiqing knew that he couldn't do this. The person in his body was getting more and more uncontrollable. If he were to find out that he had burned the woman he loved to death, Feng Zhiqing didn't know what he would do. Suddenly, he slammed his fist heavily on the dragon table. Kong Yin's expression did not change. He looked at him coldly as his gaze fell on Gu Yueqin's body. What's so good about you? You made that person abandon his life and his country just to protect you. He couldn't understand. The relationship between a man and a woman was the most unworthy thing in this world. It was the same for him towards Shen Yueji. Although he liked her, it wasn't to the point where he could give up everything for her. But today, he had almost killed Gu Yueyin for her sake. If it wasn't for Kong Yin, how could he explain it to the Gu family? For this woman, he was always so ruthless and destroyed all his escape routes. He abandoned his country. Chapter 562. He couldn't figure out what was so good about this woman. In the past, he was willing to play with him and keep him in suspense, pretending to care about her. But now, just by looking at her, he wanted to throw her corpse into the wild. Your Majesty, don't be impulsive. Put the late Empress's body back to its original place. If Your Majesty treats the late Empress's body like this, I'm afraid He didn't finish his words, but Feng Zhiqing knew what he was talking about. He rubbed his eyebrows and leaned on the desk. I want to be alone. You can leave now. Yes. Looking at the body on the desk, Kong Yin shook his head and left. As soon as he walked out of the imperial study, he saw a young woman with a pale face. She stood not far away and looked at him as if she was waiting for him to come out. Kong Yin walked to Shen Yueji and bowed to her respectfully. Greetings, Your Highness. Master Kong Yin said that you want to rely on me wholeheartedly, but you hid it from me for so long. Is this your sincerity? Shen Yueji's eyes were cold, and the corner of her mouth was slightly curved with sarcasm. Her little face was still pale. Shrouded in the darkness, only the faint stars could be seen shining on her pale face, which added a touch of cold nobility and unapproachable. Your Highness, everyone has their own fate. This is heaven's will. I'm just a monk. Although I know a lot, I can't say it. Heaven's will is like this. Is what he said true? Shin Yueji didn't press him too hard. Kong Yin paused for a while and said, yes. In fact, he has never betrayed me, right? Kong Yin looked down and said, yes. The one who wanted to kill her was Feng Jiuqing, not him. The one who risked his life to save her and gave her a promise was him, not him. Since Master Kong Yin knows this, and also knows that he can't leave you now, you don't need to rely on me. Your Highness, there are things that heaven doesn't know, and there are things that heaven doesn't know and can't do. Just like me, I sincerely rely on you. If the other soul in Feng Jiuqing's body is not removed, what will happen next? It will be replaced. Replaced? What about him? People with two souls shouldn't exist in this world. Even if they aren't replaced, His Majesty's lifespan is only 3 years. Shin Yueji's heart shook. Why? Amitba. Your Highness, this is the will of the heavens. You don't have to blame me for hiding so much from you. It's just that there are some things that I really can't say. This old monk can only think of a way to get rid of him for His Majesty. That's why you told me that you would accept whoever becomes the emperor in the future. So you already knew that his fate was like this? With a mocking tone, Shin Yueji chuckled. Which of his souls do you plan to remove? The current emperor is the main soul. Didn't her ladyship already see it? What this old monk got rid of for His Majesty is naturally this soul. The soul of the man who loved her. In her heart, she wanted him to stay. Kong Yin looked at her expression and guessed what she was thinking. He smiled faintly. May I ask Nyang Nyang, who is more important in your heart right now, the regent or the emperor? Almost without thinking, Shin Yueji immediately said, of course it's Mo Wushang. That's right. Your Highness is not reconciled to the previous emperor. Chapter 563. Now that your Highness knows what happened back then, you know that His Majesty isn't alone, but has 2 souls in his body. You know that his feelings for you aren't fake, but that fate is playing tricks on people. I believe your Highness has also let go of some things. Yes, Kong Yin was right. Even if she knew some secrets about Feng Jiuqing, it would never be possible for them to be together again. She knew clearly who she liked now, and who she would be with in the future. Isn't it good for him to be alive? Your Highness, haven't you already seen it? What this soul cares about is not the kingdom, but yourself. If you let him live, the Feng country will definitely fall into chaos. He will become a demon because of your Highness, and he will become a tyrant because of your Highness. Therefore, he can't stay. The only one who can stay is the Emperor. You've already found a way to deal with him, haven't you? What I can do is to get rid of him without harming the Emperor. As for the method, it's only half done. I'm afraid I won't be able to do anything to him in the near future. I'll need your Highness's help in this matter. How can I help you? I believe your Highness has seen it. When the Emperor appeared, he was only for you. If anything happens to you, even the Emperor himself won't be able to suppress the soul in his body from appearing. As long as your Highness is safe, the Emperor will not have to worry. In other words, your Highness is the only one who can calm His Majesty's emotions. You want me to admit that I'm Gu Yueqin when he appears. As smart as she was, how could she not understand the meaning behind Kong Yin's words? Kong Yin nodded. Indeed. Your Highness is a smart person. How would you not know how heartless the Emperor is when he appears? There were several times when he wanted to take your Highness's life. Your Highness, you've personally experienced all of this. Your Highness, I want you to admit your identity not for anything else but to protect yourself. If the Emperor appears again, he will still remember what happened today and might hurt you. Amitabha. Her ladyship's death has always been a knot in His Majesty's heart. It's getting harder and harder for him to calm down. Every time he comes out, he will think of a way to hurt himself. Grandmaster Kong Yin, I've always thought that he was the one who used me, betrayed my feelings, and caused the death of the child in my womb. I've always hated him, and I've always wanted revenge. But now, he's telling me that he has no children, that he has never shared a room with this consort, and that the person who killed this consort wasn't him. His promise to this consort has always been true and has never been false. She hated the wrong person and took revenge on the wrong person. Really? Shin Yueji's heart was in a mess. Everything can't be generalized. This old monk's words to Your Highness will always count. No matter what Your Highness chooses in the end, this old monk will always stand by Your Highness' side. The Emperor was a good emperor, but not a good husband. The Empress will leave sooner or later. Before she leaves, the Empress only needs to follow her heart. Kong Yin looked at her disappointed expression. Your Highness, the wind is cold and dew is heavy at night. You're still injured. You should go back and rest first. You said that his lifespan is only 3 years, right? Yes. His Majesty is busy with the affairs of the country and has been weak and sickly since young. In addition, he has twin souls in his body. His fate is destined to be full of setbacks and his lifespan will be halved. Chapter 564. I understand. It's getting late. Master Kong Yin should go back and rest. After taking one last look in the direction of the imperial study, Shin Yueji did not linger any longer and turned to leave. Kong Yin watched her leave for a while and shook his head. The grudges of this young man's life were really hard to understand. Fingxi Palace Shuangxi had been waiting for her for a long time because she was worried about her. When she saw her coming back, she quickly went up to her. Your Highness, why did you chase me back? I was worried for a long time. If you didn't come back, I would have gone to the imperial study to look for you. Worried about me? Shin Yueji looked up at her. Your Highness, tell me what I'm worried about. Shuangxi stomped her feet. Look at His Majesty. He's too scary. He left you alone in the imperial study. Of course I'm scared. After you came out of the imperial study, he chased me out again. I'm really worried that you're alone in there. If His Majesty goes crazy and hurts you, I won't be able to answer to the General and Madam. Your Highness, do you think we should tell the General and Madam about His Majesty so that they can make plans? Hearing this, Shin Yueji was shocked. She raised her head almost immediately and looked at her. You can't. Your Highness. Shuangxi was confused. Shin Yueji calmed down quickly. His Majesty has his reasons for hiding this. I've found something. Besides, Master Kong Yin is in the palace. Nothing will happen. It's not like you don't know father and mother's temperament. If they find out about His Majesty's matter, I'm afraid that the entire capital city will know about it. After all, His Majesty is the ruler of a country. How could he end up like this? Oh, this servant understands Your Majesty's concerns, but His Majesty seemed too terrifying just now. He didn't even care about Your Majesty at all. This servant is just worried about Your Majesty. If His Majesty were to act like this again and do something to harm Your Majesty, it just so happens that this servant and Grandmaster Kong Yin aren't here, so we can't guarantee Your Majesty's safety. It's okay. It won't happen again. By the way, is Li Yingying awake? Yes. She's lying in bed. She has a bad temper. Your Highness, it's best if you don't look. This servant reckons that she's about to hate you to death right now. Oh. No matter what, she's still a member of our Phoenix Perch Palace. This time, it was indeed our fault for not being able to protect her. Speaking of this matter, she had miscalculated. She had predicted that Gu Yueyin wanted to frame her, so she had pushed Li Yingying out. When the time came, she would appear again and plead with Feng Zhiqing. She believed that he would not do anything to Li Yingying. But what she didn't expect was for him to appear. Even Gu Yueyin probably didn't expect this to happen. Her Highness, Shuangxi was still a little hesitant. It was obvious that he did not want her to go over. Shen Yueji glanced at her. All right, she's like a cripple now. How do you think she can hurt me? Perhaps feeling that what she said made sense, Shuangxi no longer blocked her way. All right then, Your Highness, follow this servant. Li Yingying had already woken up. Although the title of second imperial concubine had returned to her, the current her was worse than a cripple with her empty arms. Her face was pale and her almond-shaped eyes were red and swollen. Hearing the movement, she looked up suddenly. Chapter 565. When she saw Shen Yueji, a strong hatred flashed across her eyes. Shen Yueji acted as if she did not see this hatred. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed like an old friend. Her eyes fell on her empty arms. Did you just change the medicine? Does it hurt? Does it hurt? Your Highness, do you want to try? Li Yingying, how dare you? How can you speak to Imperial Consort Nyang like this? Previously, Li Yingying might have been afraid of Shuangxi's reprimand because she was Shen Yueji's confidant. She would always try to please her no matter what she did. However, it was different now. Her arms had been destroyed and there was no longer any place for her to climb. Even if she was a second-ranked concubine, what could she do? If Imperial Consort Nyang feels that this servant is an eyesore, when this servant can move, this servant will leave on my own. In the future, I will not appear in front of your Highness and be an eyesore. Yingying, you saw the situation at that time. The emperor is no longer the previous emperor. In his eyes and heart, there is only the late empress. Even if this concubine wants to help you, I am unable to. Your Highness, have you forgotten? Before entering the palace, how did your Highness win against this servant? You said that as long as you are in the inner palace, you can guarantee that this servant will not have to worry and will help this servant take revenge. This servant believed it. In the days when your Highness fell off the cliff, Qiao Yu advised this servant to listen to the Empress and let this servant rely on another master to survive in the inner palace. However, this servant still remembers the kindness that Imperial Consort Nyang has shown to this servant. Ying Fei, you don't need to call yourself this servant in front of this concubine anymore. But Imperial Consort Nyang, dare I ask you, in your heart, don't you always treat me as a servant? What difference does it make if I am Ying Fei or a lowly servant? Your Highness will never know how loyal I am to you. For your Highness, I can refuse Qiao Yu's request to rely on the Empress when your life and death are unknown. If you are really ill, then Qiao Yu and I will be fish on the Emperor's plate. If she wants to get rid of us, it will only take a word. However, I will always remember Imperial Consort Nyang's kindness. Because I'm willing to believe in your Highness, but your Highness, may I ask, what did you give this servant? You asked the Emperor to chop off my arms. Do you know what it means to have my arms destroyed? I am a person, a living person. I need my hands. I can do many things with these hands, but because of the words of the Imperial Consort, the Emperor ordered for them to be chopped off. Dare I ask your Highness, if your hands were chopped off, would you still be able to sit here and talk to me in one piece? Do you hate me to death in your heart? You hate this consort. Yes. I hate it. You made me lose everything that I deserve. Li Yingying, how dare you? You wanted to be the emperor's woman and now your wish has been fulfilled. Don't forget who gave you the position of second-rank consorting. That was only Imperial Consort Nyang's charity towards me. Now that I'm like a cripple, does Imperial Consort Nyang think that the emperor will still favor a cripple like me? There are countless beauties in the imperial harem. I admit that my looks are average and not as stunning as Imperial Consort Nyang's. Now that I've lost my arms, even if I'm a second-rank consorting, why would the emperor still favor me? When she saw that Shin Yueji didn't say anything, she couldn't help but sneer. Imperial Consort Nyang, do you have anything to say now? Chapter 566. Double Happiness. Your Highness. You can leave first. Your Highness. Don't worry. Just as Concubine Ying said, she is like a cripple now. How can she hurt me? Yes, Your Highness. Double Happiness was a little worried, but she didn't disobey Shin Yueji. She left respectfully. Your Highness, this servant will stand guard outside. If you need anything, shout for this servant. This servant can hear you. What right do you have to hate me now? This sentence made Li Yingying raise her head and look at her with hatred. Shin Yueji smiled slightly and sat on the edge of the bed. She was very close to her and didn't move. She tilted her body slightly and looked down at her. Ying Fei, don't you think that everything that you have experienced today is your own fault? Don't you think that you are infallible? When Xiao Yu died, you pushed all the blame to her. It seems that you have a deep relationship between master and servant. Even when the Empress had an accident at my place, she used Xiao Yu to threaten you. Actually, in Concubine Ying's heart, it wasn't just because of Xiao Yu. In other words, are you planning for your future? What growing up together? What deep relationship between master and servant? What glory and wealth she can share with you? You both obviously have your own thoughts. Just like her, once she climbs to a high place, she is afraid to fall down. Just like you, but you hide it too well. You have a master and a servant. You are indeed the master. In terms of scheming, you are much better than Xiao Yu. I'm afraid that even when she dies, she still thinks that you still have her in your heart and still feel guilty towards her. In fact, you already knew about everything that Xiao Yu had done behind your back, but you silently allowed her to do it. What you wanted to do but didn't dare to do, you needed someone to help you carry it out. Coincidentally, Xiao Yu's reckless behavior made you think of her. You. I don't understand what you are saying. What are you talking about? If Li Yingying had hands, she would definitely cover her ears without hesitation. However, Shin Yueji's words made her unable to refute. She didn't want to listen anymore. She shook her head fiercely. What are you talking about? I don't understand anything. It doesn't matter. I'll pretend you don't understand and continue to talk about her. Since consorting doesn't like to hear this, I'll tell you something else. Gu Yueyin has sent someone to Phoenix Perch Palace to pass on a message. It's clear that she's targeting me. You're just a servant in Phoenix Perch Palace. Even if you've been the Emperor's woman before, you're still insignificant and not worth mentioning in the Empress' eyes. If she wants to get rid of you, she only needs to say a single word. Perhaps she doesn't even need to say a single word. Even a glance or a single action can easily take your life. Why would she go to such great lengths to send a palace maid we've never seen to deliver a message? Anyone would know that her objective is this consort. But you were too eager to be with His Majesty and completely forgot what this consort had told you before. Not only did you not follow this consort's instructions, you even went to the imperial study on your own accord. What I saw was all real. I really saw the late Empress' body. She came back to life and strangled me. If you don't believe me, look. Li Yingying raised her head and showed her the strangulation marks on her neck. Chapter 567. Shen Yueji's eyes darkened, but she didn't show much surprise on her face. Do you think it was because of the former empress? I don't want to experience that suffocating pain again. How could it be fake? If it was fake, then where did the scar on my neck come from? I have no enmity with the former empress. If she didn't attack me first, why would I hurt her? What does it matter to you whether it's real or fake? I just don't understand. Why doesn't the emperor believe me? He doesn't believe that I didn't hurt the former empress at all. I didn't intend to hurt her at all. I don't have any deep hatred with her, so why would I hurt her? But the emperor can't distinguish right from wrong. I like the emperor so much and think for him wholeheartedly, but why did he? Shen Yueji shook her head and got up from the bed. She didn't look at her again. You want the emperor to believe you. So what if he doesn't believe you? Can't Fei see it? There are two people living in the emperor's body, two different people. Hearing her words, Li Yingying seemed to understand, but also seemed to not understand. She shook her head fiercely. No, I don't understand. You deliberately lied to me. Shen Yueji, when we were in the general's mansion, you lied to me like this. Don't think that I will believe you again and work for you again. I won't ever. Let's not talk about what benefits your current identity can bring you. Just the fact that you lost an arm is enough to make even the lowest servant look down on you. Concubining, you can only rely on me. Now that I've become like this, what do you want me to do for you? Shen Yueji, how can your heart be so cruel? How did I offend you? Why do you have to choose me? I've already been destroyed by you. Isn't it enough to destroy me once? Do you want me to give my life to you? I want you to remember that the one who destroyed everything was you. You brought this upon yourself. You didn't listen to my advice. You made your own decision. Shen Yueji's expression became cold and she looked down at her. Sure enough, Li Yingying was still afraid when she saw her indifferent look. Ben Gong had said long ago that Ben Gong was the one the empress was targeting. It was you who didn't listen to advice and insisted on going to see the emperor. You clearly knew that it was a trap, but you still insisted on jumping in. You want to be the emperor's woman, but you only have this little bit of skill. I'm afraid that before you can even touch a corner of His Majesty's clothes, you will be devoured by those women until not even your bones are left. Do you really think that just because His Majesty touched you, you're the only one? What do you take this harem for? Or did he forget that the emperor was the ruler of a country? The one thing he doesn't lack the least is women, especially a foolish woman like you who thinks she's infallible, thinks she's smart, and really thinks that she's the only one in the emperor's heart. Ever since they entered the palace, Shen Yueji had always spoken to her in a calm tone. She had never been as harsh and cold as she was today. Li Yingying's words were at the tip of her tongue, but nothing came out. She knew that all of this was her own presumption. But she couldn't accept it. She hated that Shen Yueji had promised her that as long as she stayed in the harem, she would keep her safe. In the end, today, when the emperor was punishing her, not only did she not plead for mercy, she even asked the emperor to break her arms. Chapter 568. She believed that if it weren't for her words, perhaps her arms would still be intact. How could they be cut off? She was just a chess piece being used by her, a dispensable existence. That was why she said so ruthlessly and decisively, because the person who had her arms cut off was not her, and the person who had her hands cut off was not her. After saying so much, Your Highness, are you here to see me make a fool of myself? Li Yingying smiled sadly. Yes, I'm afraid that I'm a joke in your eyes now, imperial concubine. It should be said that I'm a joke from the beginning to the end. When I brought you into the palace, I was still hesitating whether it was right or wrong. Until you mentioned your family, your mother, and the man who once saved your life and died for you. I thought that you should take the love between a man and a woman very lightly. Yes, I did take the love between a man and a woman very lightly before, but since I met the Emperor, Shin-Yueji, you will never know how excellent the Emperor is. Especially when I saw that His Majesty doted on and indulged you in every possible way, while you only used His Majesty, I felt indignant on behalf of His Majesty. His Majesty was clearly so good to you, so why do you still treat His Majesty like this? The Emperor is the Emperor of a country. When did he lower his status to treat a woman like this? Why can't you feel the Emperor's kindness? Why do you ruin the Emperor's love? What? Shin-Yueji, did I poke your sore spot? You're right. The Emperor loves me deeply, but he was ruined by me like this. It's really my fault. Li Yingying didn't expect that she would admit it so quickly. She had planned to mock her a few more times, but she was speechless because of her sudden admission. She just looked at her, moved her lips, and didn't know what to say. The feeling that Shin-Yueji gave her now was too different from before. She was like a helpless child. She was lonely and helpless after being seen through. She didn't know what to do. She was surprised why Shin-Yueji gave her this feeling, but it was true. It was true. Do you want to leave the palace? The sudden words made Li Yingying pause again. Since you hate this consort and feel that you will no longer be favored in the future, then there is no need to keep you in this prison of the harem. I will set you free. What do you mean? Nothing much. Suddenly. She looked up at her and suddenly smiled. She just wanted to smile. I just don't want to take revenge anymore. You don't want revenge? Tonight, she found out too many things, including coming here to see Li Yingying. She just wanted to see her. Apart from what she had said to her, she really wanted to let her go. Let her go. As for the people of the Li clan, I'll make them suffer a fate worse than death. As you wish, I'll torture them to death to give you an explanation. As for you, I'll make sure your clan is filled with wealth, and you'll have 100 servants. No one will dare to disrespect you. Even if you lost your arms, you were still a master, and the servants didn't dare to overstep your authority. If you continue to stay in the palace, I cannot guarantee what your future will be like. However, the only thing I can give you is that your life can be spared. However, you will no longer be favored by the Emperor. Even if you have the best food and clothing in the harem, you will always be alone. Are you willing? Chapter 569. Because she didn't have any background to rely on and was despised by the Emperor, even if she killed her, the Emperor wouldn't say anything. Coming out of the side hall, she saw Shuangxi looking inside. Shin-Yueji glanced at her indifferently. What are you looking at? What did the Empress say to Li Yingying? She seems to have calmed down a lot. Nothing, just telling the truth. Saying this, she looked at Shuangxi. Why do you look so sneaky? Oh, the Empress is here. Guyuan. Yes, when this servant came out from inside, I saw her. This servant told her that her ladyship was inside to visit consorting, so she entered the hall by herself. She said that she was only looking for you to talk and that it was nothing important. After you finish visiting consorting, you can go see her. The Empress, Shuangxi suddenly looked at her and lowered her voice. I think the Empress is too abnormal this time. When she came to see the Empress, she didn't show her fangs and claws like before. The Empress, what do you think the Empress is up to? Should I go to the Imperial study to inform the Emperor? It will save the Empress from being a ghost. No need. I'm afraid she doesn't have the energy to play tricks tonight. Brushing off her hand, Shin-Yueji went in first. As soon as she entered the hall, she saw Gu Yueyin sitting on her main seat. She was the master of the 6 palaces after all. Shen Yueji just glanced at her, then looked away and sat on the round chair next to her. Gu Yueyin didn't care about her rudeness at all. If it were before, she would feel uncomfortable, but today, she was more teasing. It's getting late. At this time, I know that the imperial concubine is injured and should rest early, but I still come to disturb my sister. I feel very sorry. Hearing this, Shen Yueji smiled. You and I know what the Empress is thinking. Since you have something to say, why do you beat around the bush and say these hypocritical words? Since the Empress can say it, it's another matter whether I believe it or not. Seeing her rudeness, Nanny Dang couldn't help changing her face. Nanny Dang. Gu Yueyin signaled with her eyes. Although Nanny Dang was dissatisfied, she did not dare to show it. She could only wait beside Gu Yueyin respectfully. However, she still couldn't help but remind her, Guifei Nyang, my family's empress also came with sincerity. Knowing that consorting Nyang's arms were cut off by the emperor, her heart ached and she came to visit. When Nanny Dang's words fall into my ears, do you know what they sound like? What? Gu Yueyin pursed her lips and smiled. Shen Yueji sarcastically raised the corner of her mouth. It's like a cat crying crocodile tears. How did Ing Fei get injured? How did she appear in the imperial study? Where did the secret guards in the imperial study go? Why was the body of the late empress moved out of the secret chamber? Her limbs were destroyed, her head sewn up, her tongue cut, and her eyes as dark as night. Empress, don't you know all of this? What does Sister Imperial Consort mean by this? I don't understand what you're saying. Of course you don't understand, because you know this in your heart. Imperial Consort Shin, you are presumptuous. My family's empress came to visit out of goodwill, but you use this tone to mock my family's empress. Do you need me to mock the empress's actions? Chapter 570. What this consort has said is the truth. You came to find me tonight only for the sake of His Majesty. Since it's for the sake of His Majesty, then don't mention these unimportant things. His Majesty has the heart to protect you, so what can this consort do? What can Ing Fei do? Compared to the power of the Gu family in court, the humiliation that Ing Fei has suffered is really nothing. His Majesty won't punish you for her. Shen Guifei, you know that Ben Gong came to your Feng Qi Palace once before, but was poisoned and had to recuperate in Xianghe Palace. From your tone, it seems that you think that the matter in the imperial study was caused by Ben Gong. The Empress is only recuperating, it's not like she's about to die. She can't speak. Shen Yueji sneered, there are so many servants in Xianghe Palace that you can use. In addition, you are the mistress of the inner palace. What you want to do, isn't it just a matter of a word from you? Shen Guifei, you need evidence to speak. You said that what happened to Ing Fei in the imperial study is related to Ben Gong. Could it be that you are making irresponsible remarks? Ben Gong knows that you and Ing Fei have a good relationship, but you cannot put the crime of her being punished by the emperor on Ben Gong's head. Ben Gong knows that she was punished by the emperor and deeply sympathizes with her. That's why I came to see her, but Ben Gong is not making irresponsible remarks about the empress, nor is it slander. As for why I said that this matter is related to the empress, it is because a servant from your Xianghe Palace came to pass a message that the emperor was handling official business in the imperial study and had a headache. At this point, she looked at Gu Yueyin. She saw that Gu Yueyin was pretending to be calm. Even though she was trying her best to maintain her composure, it was still too easy for Shen Yueji to see through her. The current Gu Yueyin in front of her was full of flaws. Before that servant girl came to pass the message, she personally admitted that she was a servant of your Xianghe Palace. Gyeonggi Palace does have a lot of servants, but for this kind of matter, Gyeong would normally send trusted aides to handle it, especially noble consort Shin. If Gyeong really wanted noble consort Shin to accompany His Majesty, Gyeong would definitely send Dang Momo to say it. There is no need to use a lowly servant that I have only used a few times. Gu Yuein looked at her. Serving His Majesty has always been this consort's job. When His Majesty had a headache, this consort had always been by his side to serve him. Furthermore, Gyeong has received news that the Emperor is not in the imperial study. How can we get someone to pass the message to noble consort Shin and let noble consort Shin accompany the Emperor? In addition, noble consort Shin, you are already injured. Even if Gyeong does not consider the Emperor, Gyeong should still consider noble consort Shin's health. And why would he send someone to pass the message for Imperial Consort Mei to serve the Emperor? Gu Yuein sighed. Gyeong knows that Imperial Consort Mei might have some misunderstandings about Gyeong, but Imperial Consort Mei must clearly think about what kind of place the inner palace is. There are countless pairs of eyes in the inner palace that are eyeing us like tigers watching their prey. It is not uncommon to see such a situation of framing someone. If Imperial Consort Mei really suspects Gyeong because of this matter, then it would be the intention of others. I believe that with Imperial Consort Mei's intelligence, you should not be so easily used by others. That servant girl who passed the message, I believe that you have never seen her in Gyeonggi Palace. The answer was non-committal. Seeing Shin Yueji's silence, Gu Yuein smiled proudly. Chapter 571. Since you've never seen her, how can you be sure that she's a servant of my Xianghe Palace? Gu Yuein sighed softly and got down from the high seat. She walked slowly to Shin Yueji and wanted to hold her hand, but Shin Yueji avoided her with a smile. She stretched out her hand in the air awkwardly, but soon, she hid the embarrassment in her eyes and smiled. Now, you and I should unite and work together. Since the Empress is unwilling to admit it, and I happen to be a stubborn person, the easier it is for a person to quibble, the more I want her to tell the truth. If the Empress thinks that someone deliberately framed the Empress, why don't you prove it with me? Is it someone who framed the Empress, or is it you who did it? Otherwise, there will be a lot of estrangement in my heart. I don't want to keep suspecting the Empress and feel that the Empress is secretly manipulating things. Even my impression of the Empress is bad and I don't want to be cold to you. What do you think? Since you want to prove my innocence, I'll do as you wish. What do you want to do? I'll cooperate with you. Good. The Empress is really sensible. In this case, I won't be polite. Come here. Your Highness. Bring the little palace maid up. Yes. Hearing the name of the little palace maid from her mouth, Gu Yuein's expression changed immediately. She thought of something bad and turned around to look at Nanny Dang. Nanny Dang avoided her eyes. Originally, she had wanted to wait for her to return and then secretly deal with her. Who would have thought that after returning from Phoenix Perch Palace, this little girl seemed to have disappeared? She secretly turned the Imperial Palace upside down but still couldn't find her. At that time, the Empress was busy planning other things. She thought that since the plan had been completed, maybe the little palace maid was afraid of being exposed, so she found a place to hide. After all, the Imperial Palace was so big, and no matter how powerful she was, she couldn't search all the solemn places in the Imperial Palace. But who would have thought that the little palace maid couldn't be found and was detained here by Shin Yueji? Even in her dreams, she didn't expect that this woman was so vigilant that she didn't even let go of a servant. Especially when she saw the little palace maid being carried up, she looked like she was dying. There were injuries all over her body. The skin on his arm looked like it had been scalded and then peeled off. There was not a single part of her body that was unscathed. It was a ghastly sight, even scarier than a dead person. This is, the two of them were shocked, and it was already very difficult for them to maintain their previous calm. Shin Yueji smiled and touched her beautiful face with her fingers. Who is it? Can't the Empress and Dang Mama recognize me? Right, this maidservant was pushed out to die by all of you. All of you probably don't even remember her appearance clearly, so how would you know her name? Why don't I remind Her Majesty and Nanny Deng again and introduce this maidservant's background to you? This girl's name is Qiu Lian, and she's from Huaiyang. She was sold into the palace by her father at the age of 7. When she was 10, she caught the eye of a steward in the palace because of her delicate appearance, eloquence, and intelligence. At the age of 14, I was sent to the Empress Xianghe Palace to be on duty. The people that the Empress trusts are all her trusted aides. Chapter 572. Although this little girl is clever, in a place like Xianghe Palace, all her advantages can't compare to a finger of others. She has to do the lowest work quietly. As for having this consort accompany His Majesty in the imperial study, it must be Nanny Deng's idea. Find the most inconspicuous maidservant in Xianghe Palace to pass the message to this consort. At that time, even if the matter is exposed, you can shirk all responsibility. Not only will the Emperor not be suspicious, but even I myself will not be able to help but wonder if I have wronged the Empress. Did I believe the words of others and feel that I have wronged the Empress? What are you saying, Imperial Consort? Why can't this consort understand? This maidservant was tortured to this state by you. Even if she was in good condition, this consort wouldn't recognize her. Just as Imperial Consort said, someone deliberately framed this consort. How did you? She was tortured because she was disobedient and stubborn. She naively thought that because she was loyal to Her Majesty, you would send someone to save her sooner or later. So this girl's mouth was tightly shut. So many tortures were used on her, but she didn't say anything. It was Her Majesty who sent her to pass the message. Hearing Shin Yueji's words, Gu Yuan's expression finally looked better. She looked as if she had just survived a disaster after knowing that the matter hadn't been exposed. She wiped her forehead with her white hand, and there was panic on her face, as if she was afraid that the matter would be exposed. She looked down at the dying Qiu Lian, who happened to be looking at her. She moved her lips. Did she say who the mastermind was in the end? Shin Yueji smiled and touched Qiu Lian's deathly pale face. Her pretty little face was full of bumps and hollows, making it difficult to tell what she had looked like before. One of her eyes had long been destroyed by the fire. In the large phoenix perch palace, one could even smell the scent of cooked meat on her body. It was fragrant and terrifying. Come, be obedient and tell this consort. Did Her Majesty order you to pass the message to this consort? Qiu Lian didn't speak. When Shin Yueji reached out her hand, she opened her mouth and wanted to bite her. Fortunately, double happiness reacted in time. Mao Ran whipped her face. Pa! The sound of the whip was so loud that Qiu Lian's already bruised face split open again. It was a frightening sight to behold. Even Gu Yuan, who had seen all kinds of scenes, felt a bit angry when she saw Shin Yueji treat a maidservant so cruelly. She had long known that this maidservant was a member of Auspicious Harmony Palace. Regardless of whether she knew it or not, she had always been adamant that Qiu Lian was a member of Auspicious Harmony Palace. She, the mistress of Xianghe Palace, was here, but she treated her servant like this. Did she even put her in her eyes? Right now, Gu Yuan didn't dare to voice her anger. If she dared to be angry, she would be admitting that Qiu Lian was a slave of her Auspicious Harmony Palace and that everything Qiu Lian had done had been secretly instructed by her. If she wasn't angry, then she, Shin Yueji, was just an insignificant imperial concubine Shin. She didn't even put the Empress in her eyes. In her heart, who was the master of the harem? What did she take her for? Qiu Lian let out a blood-curdling scream. In fact, she breathed in more than she breathed out. Deng Mama saw her master's hesitation and shouted angrily, "Imperial concubine Xin, what are you doing?" Chapter 573. Xin Yueji didn't look at her. Instead, she looked at the woman who was almost out of breath after being beaten by Shuangxi. "Nanny Deng, didn't you see what I was doing? I was interrogating a criminal. You imperial concubine Xin, don't you think you're being too arrogant? You're a first-rank imperial concubine of the phone country. How could you treat a servant so cruelly? If His Majesty finds out. If Empress Sister didn't say anything, how would His Majesty know? Isn't Empress the one who always spoils me the most? I believe that Empress Sister won't tell His Majesty about this, right?" Gu Yuan's face darkened. It was hard for her to maintain her smile. "Imperial concubine Xin, no matter what wrong this servant has done, you can let the servants deal with her and give her a quick death, even if it wasn't for her, why would concubine Ying's arms be chopped off? A living beauty became like this because of a few words from her. Is a second-rank imperial concubine inferior to a lowly servant in the harem? Speaking of which, she was the one who wanted Ben Gong to go to the imperial study. However, it just so happened that I accidentally became consorting and had consorting suffer for Ben Gong. In order to give consorting an explanation, Ben Gong naturally had to interrogate her and find out who the mastermind was. Even if she smiled slightly. Even if I already have the answer in my heart. You. Big Sister Empress, tell me, His Majesty didn't acknowledge anyone in the imperial study. Even Ben Gong's words sounded like they were plotting against him. Ben Gong was afraid that if I said too much, I wouldn't even be able to keep my life. In other words, if consorting hadn't taken the blame for Ben Gong, then Ben Gong would have been the one who had her arms cut off. Ben Gong doesn't have such a merciful heart to actually allow a lowly servant who wanted to put herself to death to have a quick death. I won't let her die a quick death. Xin Yueji suddenly covered her mouth and smiled. Shuangxi, go and show Empress another good one. Yes, Your Highness. Imperial concubine Xin, what do you want to do? Nothing much. I had nothing better to do today, so I sent someone to pass a message to my eldest brother. He asked him to investigate Qiu Lian's background thoroughly. He found out that she has a younger brother and a mother. When he saw Autumn Lotus's expression changed, his face that was hard to see clearly started to tremble. Seeing how her mouth is so tightly sealed and how she refuses to speak even after so many tortures, this empress can only choose another method. After all, this empress is also a person who will not rest until she achieves her goal. If others can do it, why can't this consort do it? This time, even Gu Yuan's expression changed, let alone Qiu Lian. The reason why Qiu Lian was clenching her teeth and refusing to speak was because she was using her family as a hostage. She knew that Qiu Lian did not have a good childhood. Her father was addicted to gambling. Every day, he would lose a large sum of money. Every day, he would come back and beat the three of them up. He even forced Qiu Lian's mother to sell herself to earn money. Her young mother was tortured beyond recognition by those men. Because she was too young, Qiu Lian's father could only sell her into the palace to earn a few taels of silver. Even after she entered the palace, in order to keep in touch with her mother and younger brother, she established a relationship with some influential eunuchs in the palace. This way, they could help her send letters and money outside the palace. Chapter 574. The reason why Qiu Lian was so loyal to Gu Yuan was because they had found out about her identity and used her family to threaten her. She was indifferent to her father's death, but her mother and brother were her weaknesses. so when Shin Yueji ordered people to torture her, she gritted her teeth and endured. As long as she thought of her mother and brother, she wouldn't say anything even if she was tortured to death. But she didn't expect that Shin Yueji would have such a trick. She even brought her mother and brother into the palace. When she saw her mother and brother being pressed down, their clothes were torn and there were blood stains on them. Their faces were dirty. Although the torture was not as good as hers, how could they bear it? Qiu Lian shook her head in pain. Why did you do this to my brother and my mother? If you have the ability, come at me. Shin Yueji, they have no grudge against you, why do you have to torture them like this? In the harem, which woman who died tragically was innocent? Why do you have no grudge against me here? Shin Yueji smiled faintly, speaking of which, aren't I the same as you? If we have no grudge against each other, how did you treat me? If this empress remembers correctly, you want to kill this empress, right? May I ask if I have ever offended you before? Her words made Qiu Lian speechless. But she was forced to do it. If possible, she didn't want to offend Shin Yueji, but she was just a lowly servant who worked in Xianghe Palace. At that time, Nanny Deng used her relatives to threaten her, but it was also because of her own selfishness. If she succeeded, Nanny Deng promised to give her a large sum of money. In this way, her younger brother and mother wouldn't have to live in the open with her meager salary. As long as they could get a large sum of money, they would be able to sleep in a good place and eat delicious food. Imperial concubine, this servant is begging you. If you have any problems, please come to this servant. It has nothing to do with my mother or my younger brother. My younger brother is still young and doesn't understand anything. Since the day my mother married that beast, she has never lived a good life. Imperial concubine Shin, I beg you, this servant is begging you, let them go. If you're begging someone, then you must have the attitude of begging someone. Before you beg me, you must clearly know what I want. What she wanted was for her to admit that it was the Empress who was secretly manipulating this matter. It was the Empress who asked her to come over and tell Shin Yueji to go to the Imperial study to accompany the Emperor. It was the Empress who wanted Shin Yueji dead. Qiu Lian turned around to look at her mother and brother. Finally, she clenched her teeth in despair and said, I'll tell you everything. As long as Imperial Consort is willing to let go of my mother and brother, I'll tell you everything. Impudent! Nanny Deng shouted angrily. Shin Yueji winked at Shuangxi. Shuangxi immediately took the order and stepped forward to block Nanny Deng. Nanny Deng, the truth will come to light soon. Your master hasn't said anything yet. As a servant, you dare to shout in front of concubine De. Do you want to lose your tongue? Nanny Deng's expression changed. She looked at Gu Yueyin, who was standing there quietly without saying anything. She bit her lip. Now that things had come to this, what else could she say? She, Shin Yueji, was fully prepared. She already knew what she had done in private. Chapter 575. That was why she dared to hide it from Qiu Lian, secretly investigate, and secretly bring the mother and son into the palace. She knew what Qiu Lian was afraid of, so she took advantage of Qiu Lian's weakness. She had the same goal as Qiu Lian, which was to threaten her. She now believed without a doubt that Qiu Lian would betray her. Even if it wasn't her, she would betray her for the sake of her mother and brother. Now, Gu Yuan's teeth were chattering with hatred. This Shin Yueji was too sinister. She realized that ever since she entered the palace, she and Shin Yueji had competed against each other countless times in secret and in public. But every time, Gu Yuan was the one who suffered. She had never won against her. She thought that she had done it flawlessly, but in fact, Shin Yueji had seen through everything. I admit it. It's the Empress. All of this was done by the Empress. The Empress threatened me with the lives of my mother and brother. It's, Gu Yuan rebuked angrily. The Empress suddenly showed her majesty. Qiu Lian was afraid after all. She immediately shut her mouth and was so afraid that she couldn't say a word. What does the Empress mean? Now the truth is in front of you. Doesn't the Empress want to know why I insist that it's you, Imperial Concubine Xin? Enough. Gu Yuan rebuked her angrily and looked at her coldly. Did you already know that it was me? Xin Yueji smiled without saying a word. It was Xin Yueji's indifferent expression that made Gu Yuan even more suspicious. In fact, from the beginning, when she ordered Qiu Lian to go to the imperial study, she had already known that she was the one behind it. Was there something fishy about it? So was this why the person who went to the imperial study was Li Yingying and not her? Then could she think that it had nothing to do with Li Yingying from the beginning? All of this seemed to be her scheme, but what she did was to beat Qiu Lian at her own game. Thinking of this, Gu Yuan couldn't help but feel numb. How powerful was this woman? Since she entered the palace, she had regarded this woman as a strong opponent. Now, she realized that it was underestimating her just to regard her as an opponent. She still needed to guard against her. So what if you know or not? Didn't the Emperor already know that this matter was related to the Empress? But looking at His Majesty's intentions, it seems that he doesn't intend to pursue this matter and chooses to continue protecting you, Empress. Even His Majesty can't bear to touch you, much less this consort. Ben Gong is the kind of person that likes to be realistic and hates it when other people play fake games with Ben Gong. No matter what, Ying Fei's current predicament is all because of Empress's manipulation. Don't say that you also deeply sympathize with Ying Fei's current predicament. So what if she was the mastermind? But Li Yingying's experience today, Xin Yueji couldn't absolve herself from the blame. Since she knew that this matter wouldn't be so simple, why did she let Li Yingying take the risk? He was obviously using her to get rid of Li Yingying. In the end, in Li Yingying's eyes, she was the evil person, and nothing had happened to her. Double happiness. Your Highness. Since the truth of what happened today has come to light, send Qiulian and the others out of the palace. Never let them return. Yes, Your Highness. She looked at Qiulian's pitiful state and smiled. Give them another sum of money. Chapter 576. They probably didn't expect that Xin Yueji would let them go so easily. Qiu Lian thought that they would die in the end, but she didn't expect. She not only didn't kill them, but also gave them a sum of money. For a moment, Qiu Lian had mixed feelings. She knew that Imperial Concubine Xin was not an easy person to get along with. She had been disrespectful to the Empress many times, which made the Empress embarrassed in front of the Emperor. In fact, in her heart, she was partial to the Empress. What she didn't expect was that the Empress was the one who wanted her dead, but she was the one who wanted to save her. What does Imperial Concubine Xin mean? Nothing. The truth will come to light. Since the Emperor can forgive the Empress, why can't I forgive Qiu Lian? Is she, a servant of your auspicious Harmony Palace? Xin Yueji smiled. Why? Does the Empress want to admit that you did it? Even if all the men pointed at her and everyone knew that she had something to do with what happened in the Imperial study, she still didn't admit it. Moreover, even the Emperor didn't continue to investigate this matter. It was obvious that the Emperor wanted to cover it up. Gu Yuan smiled coldly. Since this is Imperial Concubine Xin's purpose, I have nothing to say. Speaking of this, she looked at Qiu Lian. Qiu Lian's heart trembled under her cold stare. The Empress didn't want to forgive them. Even if she ran to the end of the world, she would still die. I believe that the Empress won't embarrass me if I want to let them go, right? This matter has already reached this point. Could it be that the Empress still wants to continue? Imperial Consort Shin must be joking. Since Imperial Consort Shin has the intention to let them go, why would Ben Gong find trouble with her? Nanny dang. Yes, I am here. Pass on my words. From today on, Chiu Lian has nothing to do with Xianghe Palace. Yes. Chiu Lian was so grateful that she shed tears. Many thanks to noble Consort Shin, many thanks to the Empress. This servant will never forget noble Consort Shin's great kindness. In the next life, even if I become a cow or a horse, I will repay noble Consort Shin's kindness. After Chiu Lian and her two sons left, Gu Yueyin looked at their backs for a long time. Imperial Consort Shin repaid kindness with evil. I believe that in this lifetime, Chiu Lian's heart will only be filled with guilt and gratitude towards you. In her heart, this consort has become a complete villain. As long as the Empress does as she says and doesn't make trouble for them in the future, then you will be a good person in their eyes and they will remember your kindness for the rest of their lives. Shin Yueji sat on the round chair and took a sip of tea. I believe that the Empress has not come to see this little show. If you have something to say, just say it. Nanny Deng, you can leave now. Yes, Your Highness. Double happiness. Your Highness. You go down too. Glancing warily at Gu Yueyin, Shuangxi bowed respectfully. Yes, Your Highness. This servant will take her leave. After the two of them left, only the two of them were left in the large bedroom. Gu Yueyin casually picked a piece of cake and put it in her mouth. She tasted it carefully. Imperial concubine Shin must have seen what the emperor did in the imperial study today. Shin Yueji didn't hide it and smiled. Of course. Is imperial concubine Shin scary? To be honest, the other side of the emperor is indeed scary. It makes people feel that he is heartless, cold-blooded and cruel. Chapter 577. But from Ben Gong's point of view, the emperor at least treated the former empress wholeheartedly. The way he protected the former empress today was far more than Ben Gong, and he did not even put the empress in his heart. Looking at the inner palace, who is more favored than the empress? But this time, not only did the emperor not care about the empress' feelings, he even reprimanded the empress for the former empress. Seeing that Gu Yuein's face was somewhat ugly, the latter also did not say anything. Shen Guifei is right. Not to mention Ben Gong, even Shen Guifei, in the eyes of the emperor at that time, was inferior to Gu Yuqin. The empress came to Ben Gong today just to talk about the emperor's matter. The emperor is after all the ruler of a country, the emperor of a country, but he actually cared so much about a lowly woman. Even if the former empress was Ben Gong's older sister, Ben Gong still has to say that she had an affair with the regent and completely disregarded the emperor's feelings. The emperor was infatuated with her, but she still secretly had an affair with the regent. After she died, the emperor hid it from Ben Gong and found someone to replace her body. He hid her in the imperial study and gave her the medicine to not rot. If this continues, sooner or later people will know. Ben Gong is also thinking for the emperor. The reason why I set up Shen Guifei in the imperial study today was completely for the emperor's sake. Looking at the inner palace, only Shen Guifei is suitable. The backing of your Shen family, whether it is the emperor or that person, they would not dare to act rashly. Shen Guifei's kindness to Ben Gong has always been engraved in Ben Gong's heart, so how could I really frame you? Ben Gong is just borrowing your hand to get rid of that woman. When the time is right, Ben Gong will personally explain this matter to the emperor and will definitely not let Shen Guifei be wronged. It is a good thing that the emperor is addicted to the former empress' feelings and is unable to extricate himself. It can also prove the emperor's deep feelings. But Empress, your actions make Ben Gong somewhat puzzled. Why must you get rid of the former empress' body? As you said, she is after all your older sister. Now that she is dead, why are you not willing to leave a dead person's body? Or do you really want to be like what the rumors say, that you want to torture her beyond recognition and grind her bones to ashes before you are satisfied? Shinyuaji, what do you know? The reason why I'm doing this is all for His Majesty. Guyuachin is already dead. The dead should be buried and rest in peace. Isn't it the Empress who is flustered? Every day, your mind is filled with the thought of your sister's body hidden in the imperial study. You think of the terrible state she was in after her death. It has been 2 months, and her body should have rotted long ago, but it is still as good as before. Are you afraid? Would she wake up one day? Who will take over your position? It was as if the thoughts in the bottom of his heart had been seen through. Gu Yuan's face paled. She couldn't remember when she had such thoughts. Did it start with Murong Yun or Feng Juqing? She couldn't remember clearly. She only knew that Gu Yuqing was a thorn in her heart. Even if she was dead, she wouldn't allow her corpse to be kept in the imperial study. Every time she thought of the man she loved who cared about her so much, and his cold eyes that couldn't wait to hurt her, her heart would throb in pain. It's not only Ben Gong, could it be that Imperial Consort Shin doesn't feel the same way? Chapter 578. She also heard that Phoenix Perch Palace was in a mess. Footsteps rose and fell in succession, coming from everywhere. When she woke up, it was already dawn. The sunlight shone in and she couldn't open her eyes. She moved her hand and found that her hand was held by someone. Through the owner of this hand, she saw Feng Juqing's handsome face with fatigue. He must have sat by her bed and guarded her all night. Sensing her movement, the man opened his eyes and saw that she had woken up. He stroked her forehead gently. You're awake. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Your Majesty, Shinyuaji opened her mouth. Her voice was still very hoarse. Feng Juqing touched her little face. You caught a cold. It was hot last night, so I fed you medicine last night. Hot? Yes, Your Highness. His Majesty was worried when you fainted. He guarded you all night and even skipped the morning court session today. On the side, Double Happiness spoke carefully. I just caught a slight cold. Maybe I accidentally caught a little wind when I went out at night. It's not a big deal. Your Majesty, how can you skip the morning court session because of me? In this way, the ministers in the court will think that I'm insensible, Shinyuaji said so much in one breath. Her hoarse voice gradually became better. The man looked at her with amusement. I haven't said anything yet. Why are you so anxious? Your father is a first-rank general in the court. Who would dare to talk about him? Come, drink the medicine first. Tell me what you want to eat. I'll ask someone to make it for you. Looking at the bowl of black medicine in the man's hand, Shinyuaji's stomach was full and she had no appetite. Now that she saw it, she almost threw up. She covered her mouth and wanted to vomit but couldn't. The man looked worried and patted her back thoughtfully. What's wrong? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Double Happiness was shocked and could no longer keep calm. Her Highness, this. Could it be that she was pregnant? Usually, only women would have this kind of morning sickness sometimes. Also, during the period of time when the young master was gone, if the Empress was reluctant to part with him, the two of them would do it on the bed again. Come to think of it, it's not impossible. She carefully counted the time with her fingers, but soon felt that her worries were completely unnecessary. How many days had it been since the son-in-law left? Even if it was fast, it couldn't be this fast, right? Even if she was right, it would take some time. How could she have morning sickness for a few days? Thinking of this, Shuangxi calmed down and no longer felt afraid. Instead, she echoed the emperor's words, Your Highness, good medicine tastes bitter but is good for sickness. You are still the same as when you were in the manor. Whenever I ask you to drink medicine, you want to vomit." The man smiled gently, put the broken pieces in her ears to the back of her head, and looked at her affectionately and softly. "Shuangshi is right, good medicine is bitter, good for disease. Be good, drink the medicine, so that your body can be better." "Your Majesty, the medicine is too bitter, this concubine doesn't want to drink it." "Are you sure you don't want to drink?" A teasing look appeared in the man's eyes. Just when Shin Yueji was confused, she saw Feng Zhiqing suddenly raise his hand and drink the bowl of medicine into his mouth. Just with a glance, Shin Yueji quickly realized what he was going to do next. "Ah!" she screamed, suddenly pushed the man away and rolled down the bed. The man was pushed by her unexpected, and the bitter taste in his mouth overflowed. Chapter 579. But from Ben Gong's point of view, the emperor at least treated the former empress wholeheartedly. The way he protected the former empress today was far more than Ben Gong, and he did not even put the empress in his heart. Looking at the inner palace, who is more favored than the empress? But this time, not only did the emperor not care about the empress' feelings, he even reprimanded the empress for the former empress. Seeing that Gu Yuan's face was somewhat ugly, the latter also did not say anything. Shen Guifei is right. Not to mention Ben Gong, even Shen Guifei, in the eyes of the emperor at that time, was inferior to Gu Yuqin. The empress came to Ben Gong today just to talk about the emperor's matter. The emperor is after all the ruler of a country, the emperor of a country, but he actually cared so much about a lowly woman. Even if the former empress was Ben Gong's older sister, Ben Gong still has to say that she had an affair with the regent and completely disregarded the emperor's feelings. The emperor was infatuated with her, but she still secretly had an affair with the regent. After she died, the emperor hid it from Ben Gong and found someone to replace her body. He hid her in the imperial study and gave her the medicine to not rot. If this continues, sooner or later people will know. Ben Gong is also thinking for the emperor. The reason why I set up Shen Guifei in the imperial study today was completely for the emperor's sake. Looking at the inner palace, only Shen Guifei is suitable. The backing of your Shen family, whether it is the emperor or that person, they would not dare to act rashly. Shen Guifei's kindness to Ben Gong has always been engraved in Ben Gong's heart, so how could I really frame you? Ben Gong is just borrowing your hand to get rid of that woman. When the time is right, Ben Gong will personally explain this matter to the emperor and will definitely not let Shen Guifei be wronged. It is a good thing that the emperor is addicted to the former empress' feelings and is unable to extricate himself. It can also prove the emperor's deep feelings. But empress, your actions make Ben Gong somewhat puzzled. Why must you get rid of the former empress' body? As you said, she is after all your older sister. Now that she is dead, why are you not willing to leave a dead person's body? Or do you really want to be like what the rumors say, that you want to torture her beyond recognition and grind her bones to ashes before you are satisfied? Shin Yueji, what do you know? The reason why I'm doing this is all for His Majesty. Gu Yuqin is already dead. The dead should be buried and rest in peace. Isn't it the Empress who is flustered? Every day, your mind is filled with the thought of your sister's body hidden in the imperial study. You think of the terrible state she was in after her death. It has been 2 months, and her body should have rotted long ago, but it is still as good as before. Are you afraid? Would she wake up one day? Who will take over your position? It was as if the thoughts in the bottom of his heart had been seen through. Gu Yuan's face paled. She couldn't remember when she had such thoughts. Did it start with Murong Yun or Feng Zhiqing? She couldn't remember clearly. She only knew that Gu Yuqin was a thorn in her heart. Even if she was dead, she wouldn't allow her corpse to be kept in the imperial study. Every time she thought of the man she loved who cared about her so much, and his cold eyes that couldn't wait to hurt her, her heart would throb in pain. It's not only Ben Gong, could it be that Imperial Consort Shin doesn't feel the same way? Chapter 580. She didn't dare to ask just now. The man held her hand and smiled. I'm fine. Although I was stabbed in the vital part, the Prime Minister was there to block it. The wound is not deep. I just fainted and will recover after a few days of rest at home. The Prime Minister has taken me back to the mansion. Oh. Your Majesty, please go to the Imperial study to deal with the official business. Feng Zhiqing nodded. Rest well and don't move around. I will come back to see you after I deal with the Imperial study. I know. Double happiness. Yes, Your Majesty. Your concubine is in good health. During this time, focus on light food. Look after her. Don't let her run around and take her medicine on time. Yes, Your Majesty. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will take good care of Your Majesty. After sending Feng Zhiqing off, Double Happiness got up from the ground and wiped the cold sweat on her forehead. Then she looked at Shin Yueji. Your Majesty, do you know that your reaction just now gave me a shock? Shin Yueji spat out the sugar in her mouth and wiped her mouth. What reaction? You vomited just now. Your Majesty, do you know? I almost thought you were pregnant with the son-in-law's child. If Your Majesty sends an imperial doctor to feel your pulse and give you a diagnosis, Your Majesty will know that you have cuckolded him. If Shin Yueji had water in her mouth at this moment, she would spit it out without hesitation. She touched her forehead to make sure there were no black lines on it. What did you say just now? Double Happiness was speechless. Mo Wushang just left for a few days. We just got together recently. How could I be pregnant? What the hell are you thinking about in your head every day? Do you think I'm such a casual person? Your Highness, of course you're not such a casual person, but this also depends on the situation. Son-in-law has been gone for so long, what if you're unwilling to part with him and he's unwilling to part with you? With the two of you going back and forth, Shin Yueji coughed. Double Happiness shut her mouth immediately and changed the topic. Speaking of which, there is such a thing in the Gu family. Knowing what she was talking about, Shin Yueji closed her eyes to rest. As a result, at the moment when her eyes were closed, all that lingered in her mind was Murong Yun's helpless appearance. She painfully stabbed the sharp scissors into her chest and said that she would go down to accompany her and repent. No matter how you say it, the pitiful one is still the late Empress. So it turns out that there was such a big misunderstanding, especially Lady Murong. In the past, this servant thought that she was very virtuous, but now it seems that she was pregnant before marriage. For a daughter of an aristocratic family, this is a loss of face for the entire family. This Prime Minister Gu really loves Madame Murong. He loves her so much that he doesn't even mind being cuckolded. You're right. From the beginning to the end, no one was pitiful. The only pitiful one was the late Empress. If the late Empress were still alive and knew that this was the reason why her mother treated her like this and didn't like her, I don't know what she would think. What else could she think? No matter what, the late Empress was Murong Yun's biological daughter. No matter what the reason was, it was a piece of flesh that fell from her body. The child was innocent and she didn't know anything. Since she couldn't give her what she wanted, she should have strangled her the moment she was born. She shouldn't have let her live and suffer like that. Your Majesty, however, I am very curious about the Empress' reaction. Chapter 581. I guess the Empress already knows about this. If she found out that the reason why Madame Murong did not like her sister was because she thought that Gu Yuqin was the child of her and Gu Weixing. It was because of her appearance that she was unable to be with the man she loves. Your Highness, I am curious about the reaction from Xianghe Palace. But last night, Prime Minister Gu and Madame Murong had such a big incident that even the Emperor was alarmed. It was impossible that Xianghe Palace did not react. But the Empress pretended that she did not know about it. Until now, Xianghe Palace is still calm as if nothing had happened. This is not the Empress style. She is not pretending to be dead. Does she want to jump out and die? Shen Yueji smiled. Initially, Murong Yun thought that Gu Yuqin was her and Gu Wei's child. Because of Gu Yuqin's appearance, she could only marry Gu Wei unwillingly, and had nothing to do with the man she loved. She hated Gu Yuqin so much that she tortured her so cruelly. Even her chastity was destroyed by a lowly servant in the Prime Minister's residence. Now, she knows the truth. Shen Yueji rubbed her brows. She even wants to kill Gu Wei with her own hands, let alone the Empress. Now, the Gu family is in a mess. We don't have to worry about them attacking the Shen family anymore. What did you say? The Gu family attacked the Shen family. Knowing that she had said too much, Double Happiness did not refute and nodded. Yes, the Gu family has been attacking the Shen family for a long time. Your Highness did not know that when Madame went out to pray, many men in black jumped out and wanted to kill her. Luckily, Madame was prepared before she went out and there were dozens of secret guards sent by the general to protect her. That was why they did not kill her. Is Mother all right? As soon as she heard that Shen Qiu had been assassinated, Shen Yueji's heart immediately became uneasy. Her care and concern for Shen Qiu was completely higher than Murong Yun's. Even when Murong Yun committed suicide in front of her, she didn't care about it. Your Highness, don't worry. Madame is fine. She knows martial arts, but she did not let others know. Those clowns are not her match. Double Happiness. Ah. How did you know that the people who tried to assassinate my mother were from the Gu family? In the entire Feng country, only the Gu family has a grudge against our Shen family. Moreover, they are all men of sacrifice. We can't even force them to tell us who the mastermind is. Luckily, eldest young master has a trick up his sleeve. He didn't make the survivor commit suicide. This servant heard that this group of people were all sent by Gu Wei. He saw that Nyang Nyang's limelight in the palace had overshadowed the previous empress, so he was helping his daughter gain the limelight so that Nyang Nyang will remember. But this servant thinks that this is definitely Gu Yueyin playing tricks behind the scenes. Although this Gu Wei has often acted against our Shen family, recently His Majesty entrusted the Shen family with a major matter. Gu Wei is currently busy. If it wasn't for Gu Yueyin begging him, he definitely wouldn't have the time to deal with us. Only the Empress could think of such a sinister move to attack a weak woman. Seeing Shen Yueji come down from the bed, Shuangxi jumped in fright. Nyang Nyang. What happened?